I never thought the people I loved most would be the ones to destroy me. But sitting in that upscale restaurant, watching my own brother and his boss laugh at my expense, I realized that sometimes the cruelest betrayals come from those closest to our hearts. What they didn't know was that their mockery would be the catalyst for the most dramatic turn my life would ever take. My name is Mia, and I've always been the family disappointment. While my younger brother Ryan excelled at everything honor roll, star athlete, full scholarship to business school, I struggled through community college and bounced between dead-end jobs. At 28, I was still living paycheck to paycheck, working as a barista at a local coffee shop, while Marcus climbed the corporate ladder at a prestigious marketing firm. The contrast between us was stark, and our parents never let me forget it. "Why can't you be more like Marcus?" became their favorite refrain. He was their golden child, and I was the cautionary tale they'd whisper about to relatives during family gatherings. Despite everything, I loved my brother. When he called to invite me to his promotion dinner, celebrating his advancement to senior account manager, I was genuinely happy for him. I scraped together money I didn't have to buy a decent dress and took the night off work, even though I couldn't afford to lose the hours. The restaurant was the kind of place I'd only seen in movies: crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, and prices that made my stomach clench. Ryan had reserved a private dining room for the celebration, inviting our parents, a few colleagues, and his boss, Alex Thompson, a man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. I arrived feeling self-conscious in my Target dress among all the designer outfits, but Ryan greeted me with what seemed like genuine warmth. "Mia, I'm so glad you could make it. This is such a big night for me." The dinner started pleasantly enough. Ryan gave a small speech about his journey to this promotion, thanking everyone for their support. I felt proud of him, despite the familiar sting of being reminded of all his achievements, while I had none to speak of. But then Alex Thompson stood up, wine glass in hand, and everything changed. "I want to toast Ryan not just for his professional accomplishments," Alex began, his voice carrying that confident tone of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world, but for his personal growth as well. "You see, when I first met Marcus, I was concerned about his family background." The room grew quiet. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Ryan told me about his sister," Alex continued, glancing directly at me with a smirk that made my blood run cold. "A college dropout working in food service. I worried that such mediocrity might be genetic, that perhaps Ryan might lack the drive necessary for real success." I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. But what broke my heart was seeing Ryan, my brother, the person I'd defended countless times, when friends mocked our family's financial struggles, nodding along with a smile. "But Ryan proved me wrong," Alex continued, raising his glass higher. "He showed me that sometimes excellence emerges despite unfortunate family circumstances. He's distanced himself from distractions and focused on what truly matters: his success." The room erupted in polite laughter and applause, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heart shattering. Ryan was laughing too, actually laughing, as his boss publicly humiliated me in front of our parents and his colleagues. "Mia's always been the cautionary tale in our family," Ryan chimed in, his voice carrying easily across the room. "Thank God good work ethic isn't always hereditary, right?" More laughter. Richard patted Marcus on the back like he'd just told the most brilliant joke. I sat there frozen as conversations resumed around me. No one defended me. Not my parents, who avoided eye contact. Not Marcus, who was basking in his boss's approval. I was completely alone in a room full of people who were supposed to love me. Excusing myself to the bathroom, I locked the door and stared at my reflection in the ornate mirror. Tears streamed down my face, ruining the makeup I'd carefully applied. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to take this lying down. You see, what none of them knew was that I had a secret. For the past 2 years, while working at the coffee shop, I'd been developing a mobile app in my spare time. It was a simple concept, a platform that connected local coffee shops with customers, offering personalized recommendations and loyalty programs. I'd taught myself coding through online tutorials, working late into the night after my shifts. The app was finally ready to launch, and I'd been in talks with several investors. Just 3 days before Marcus's dinner, I'd received an offer that would change my life. A tech startup incubator wanted to acquire my app for $2 million, with the condition that I stay on as Chief Technology Officer. I'd been waiting for the right moment to tell my family, wanting to surprise them. But watching Marcus and Richard mock me, I realized they didn't deserve my good news. They deserved something else entirely. I returned to the table with a calm smile, sitting through the rest of the dinner in silence. Richard continued making subtle jabs at my expense, and Marcus continued laughing along, clearly performing for his boss's approval. As dessert was being served, Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted slightly. "Interesting," he murmured, then looked up with that same condescending smile. "I just received an email from a potential client. Apparently, there's some new coffee app that's been making waves in the tech world. They want us to handle the marketing campaign." He chuckled. "Probably some amateur startup that'll crash and burn within 6 months." The irony was delicious. I kept my expression neutral as I pulled out my own phone. "What's the app called?" I asked innocently. "Brew Connect," Richard replied dismissively. "Some nobody developer thinks they're going to revolutionize the coffee industry. These small-town entrepreneurs never understand the complexities of real business." I nodded thoughtfully, then stood up. All eyes turned to me. "I have an announcement to make," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "Richard, you're absolutely right about Brew Connect. The developer is a total nobody." Marcus looked confused. Our parents exchanged glances. I smiled, feeling more confident than I had in years. "I should know. I am the developer." The silence that followed was deafening. 3 days ago, I accepted a $2 million acquisition offer for my app from Technova Incubator, I continued, watching their faces change from confusion to shock. "I'll be starting as their CTO next month, with a starting salary that's, well, let's just say it's considerably more than what Marcus makes." Richard's wineglass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. "That's impossible," Marcus stammered. "You work at a coffee shop. You don't know anything about technology." I pulled out my phone and showed them the signed contract I'd received that morning. Apparently, I know enough to create something people want to pay millions for. The transformation in Richard's demeanor was immediate and pathetic. The condescending smirk vanished, replaced by a look of panic and desperate calculation. "Sarah," he said, his voice suddenly warm and ingratiating. "What a remarkable achievement. I had no idea you were so talented. You know, I think there might have been some misunderstanding earlier. I was simply publicly humiliating me," I finished for him, "in front of my family," while my brother laughed along. Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. "Sarah, I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," I said calmly. "You chose his approval over your own sister's dignity. You threw me under the bus for a pat on the head from a man who just spent the evening treating me like I was less than human." I gathered my purse and stood to leave, but Richard grabbed my arm. "Wait," he said desperately. "About that potential client, I mentioned the one interested in Brew Connect's marketing campaign. That's actually a very prestigious account. Perhaps we could discuss—" I gently removed his hand from my arm. "Richard, I wouldn't trust you to market lemonade at a children's stand. After tonight's performance, I'll be recommending that my new company work exclusively with your competitors." His face went white. In the marketing world, losing a contract that size, especially to competitors, was career damaging. "And Marcus," I said, turning to my brother, who looked like he was about to cry, "when I start my new position next month, I'll be in a position to recruit talented individuals. I was actually planning to offer you a role on my team. The salary would have been double what you're making now." The word would hung in the air like a blade. But after tonight, I realize we have very different values. I don't work with people who laugh at others' pain for personal gain. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back one final time. "Oh, and Richard? That comment about mediocrity being genetic? You might want to rethink that theory. Sometimes excellence skips a generation, or in this case, it just takes a little longer to reveal itself." I left them sitting in stunned silence, walking out of that restaurant with my head held high for the first time in years. The aftermath was swift and satisfying. Richard's firm lost not only the Brew Connect contract, but 2 other major clients who heard about his unprofessional behavior at a business dinner. He was forced to issue a public apology and eventually resigned from the company. Marcus called me dozens of times over the following weeks, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. He'd been demoted after Richard's departure, and several of his colleagues had heard about the dinner incident. His professional reputation was damaged, and he found himself scrambling to rebuild relationships he'd burned in his quest to climb the corporate ladder. As for me, I moved to Silicon Valley and threw myself into my new role. The app launched successfully, gaining over 1 million users in its first 6 months. I bought a beautiful house in Palo Alto, and finally felt like I was living the life I'd always dreamed of. But the real victory wasn't the money or the success. It was the moment I realized that I didn't need their approval to be worthy. I'd spent so many years believing that my family's disappointment in me was justified, that I really was the failure they thought I was. That night in the restaurant, watching the people I loved most treat me with such casual cruelty, I discovered something powerful. Their opinion of me said far more about them than it ever did about me. I never spoke to Marcus again. When he finally stopped calling, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. Losing a brother hurt, but I'd gained something more valuable: self-respect and the knowledge that I was capable of extraordinary things. Sometimes I think about that dinner, about the look of shock on their faces, when they realized they'd been mocking someone who was already more successful than they'd ever imagined. It wasn't the revenge I'd planned, but it was the revenge I deserved. The best part? I'd gotten it simply by being myself, the person they'd never bothered to really see. 6 months later, I received a wedding invitation from Marcus. I didn't attend, but I did send a gift. A framed screenshot of a tech magazine article featuring me as one of 30 under 30 innovators to watch. The inscription read, "To my brother, proof that sometimes the family disappointment was never really the disappointment at all." I never heard from him again, and I was perfectly fine with that. After all, I'd learned something valuable that night. The people who truly matter are the ones who see your worth, even when you can't see it yourself. Everyone else? They're just background noise in the symphony of your own success.